How can you save more for retirement than allowed by a 401k or IRA? What is a health savings account and how does it work? And what free online tool can you use to maximize your credit card rewards? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 67th episode of the DoughRoller podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody, this podcast is sponsored by Betterment, the most preferred automated investing service. Betterment has cutting-edge technology to optimize returns, minimize taxes, and save you time and money. Join over 34,000 customers who have already streamlined their portfolio management at betterment.com/roller. That's betterment.com/ROLLER. So today we're going to cover health savings accounts. I've received a number of email from folks about HSAs, and I've actually never opened an HSA for reasons I'll describe in a bit. And in some ways, I'm kind of kicking myself that I've not done that. And we'll talk about why. But that's what we're going to cover today. Before we get to it, though, I want to briefly talk about our money tip of the day. I just came across this site. You know, it's funny to me, having blogged for so long about personal finance, and I've just come across so many great resources and tools, websites, and I keep track of them all. But there are still so many out there that I find something new almost every single day. And this is one I just ran across the other day. It's called, EV Reward. It's evreward.com/store. And basically what you can do is, think of it as a search engine, a Google, if you will, for finding either how you can maximize your credit card rewards depending on where you're shopping, or how to find deals on something specific. So you can search either a store like Home Depot, or you can search a product like flowers, for example. And I was looking at different things, particularly as I'm looking to maximize my credit card rewards for free travel. And when I type in Home Depot and search that on this site, what it does is it will show you, among other things, the various frequent flyer mile programs and hotel rewards, and how much you'll earn if you use, say, their credit card at in this case, Home Depot. So American Airlines card, you'd get 2 miles per dollar spent. Amtrak, $2 points per dollar spent. Delta Sky Miles, you just get 1 Sky Mile per dollar spent. And it lists, it's interesting, it lists Hawaiian Airlines, Hilton, Marriott, Southwest, US Air. And it also lists the points you'll receive from various points programs like Ultimate Rewards, which is what Chase calls their points program. If you're a member of Ultimate Rewards, you'd get 3 points per dollar. And then it also lists the cash back you would get at various cashback websites like Ebates, which I've talked about in the past, and Big Crumbs, which interestingly will be a tip of the day in the future, but I guess you can check it out soon if you want. That's another one I just came across. And there are others. So it's very easy to use. It's free. You search for, if you're going to be going, particularly if you're going to be spending a lot of money. Let's say you're doing a remodel and you're going to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, or just a regular expense. It will help you figure out how to maximize the rewards depending on the programs that you're a member of and the credit cards that you carry. And so I thought it was worth mentioning today. So again, that's, I don't know how they pronounce it, EV Reward, I guess, evreward.com/store. And so that's the site. Check it out. If you've used it in the past, let me know what you think. Appreciate hearing from you. So that's the money tip of the day. Now on to the main topic, using a health savings account. We're going to talk about, we're going to try to answer 3 questions. One is simply, what is an HSA or health savings account? How can you, believe it or not, how can you use an HSA to save for retirement, which may come as a surprise to some of you? Why would a health savings account help you save for retirement? We'll talk about that. And then a question that actually has come up recently for me, and that is, should you actually, if you had a choice, you had limited money, you couldn't max out all your accounts, what should you fund first, an HSA or an IRA? So that's what we're going to cover today. And this really came up and front and center for me through a couple of emails I received. The first was from a reader or listener named Robert, and he wrote, I would like for you to cover HSAs in a future podcast. We just started using one, and we are getting confused and occasionally tripped up by some of the rules. That was an email from Robert. And then a listener named Patrick wrote in, and he said, I have a show idea, using your HSA as an investment vehicle. I thought we had to pull all funds out of an HSA by the end of each year, but that is incorrect. And Patrick is right. You don't have to pull all of your money out or use all of your money in an HSA by the end of the year. We'll talk about that. But their emails really brought this issue front and center for me, and so I wanted to cover it. And so that's what we're going to do today. So let's start with question 1. What is an HSA? So the first thing I want to say is what it's not. It is not a flexible spending arrangement, or sometimes folks refer to it as a flexible spending account. And this actually tripped me up. And, I've always used a flexible spending account, and then I would hear this term health savings account. And I think, well, that's probably the same thing, right? But they're not. They're different. You may have used a flexible spending arrangement, and that's where you can put money aside pre-tax, and you can use it for certain qualified medical expenses. But as you probably know, you have to use it all that year, or you forfeit it. Now, the rules have changed where, for example, in 2014, you can actually use it for some expenses you incur early in 2015, right? But if you don't use it by the deadline, you lose it, you forfeit it, which is always kind of tricky. It was like, when you decided how much to contribute for the year, you had to make that decision in advance. And I'd always talk to my wife and well, how much do you think we'll spend? I don't want to put too much aside and then not use it. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I guess to put it on your perspective, we've never had that problem. We've always used it all. But that always made flexible spending arrangements, I think, a bit of a headache. And I think a lot of folks tend to estimate on the very conservative side so you don't lose any money, and that's kind of what we do. But that is not what an HSA is. An HSA is different. An HSA is a tax-advantaged medical savings account, meaning you will contribute pre-tax dollars to it, just like you contribute pre-tax dollars to a flexible spending arrangement, just like you contribute pre-tax dollars to a 401k or a deductible IRA. An HSA, it's a tax-advantaged medical savings account in the same way you use pre-tax dollars. But here's the catch. It's available to taxpayers enrolled in a high-deductible health plan. In other words, not everyone can contribute to an HSA. Before you can contribute, you must first be enrolled in a high-deductible health plan. Now, you may be asking, well, what's a high-deductible health plan? Well, the IRS has an answer to that. And it's actually a somewhat convoluted answer. They go through just a mind-numbing amount of detail in IRS publication 969. If you're having trouble sleeping, I highly recommend it. It should cure that quickly. It is as dense can be. And I actually tried to read through it, and I didn't fall asleep, but I got groggy. It's tough. But if we're going to sum it up for 2014 for an individual, a high-deductible health plan is one where your deductible is at least $1,250. And if you have family coverage, your deductible in 2014 has to be at least $2,500. Now, it got a little complicated when, for a family plan, you sometimes have deductibles for each individual, and then you have deductible for the whole family, and it has to meet, as I understand IRS publication 969, it gets really confusing, but it has to meet both. Here's the thing. If you're close and you're not positive whether either the plan you're in now or the plan you may be considering later this year or into next year is a high-deductible health plan, then ask your employer if you have your health insurance through an employer, or if you're buying on the open market, ask the insurance company you're talking to about your plan. They will be able to tell you whether the plan qualifies as a high-deductible health plan, or again, if you're shopping for a plan, they'll be able to tell you, these over here are high-deductible health plans. You can contribute to an HSA if you elect one of these plans, and these plans over here are not. And that's really, I think, the easiest and best way to be sure. But again, for 2014, for individuals, deductible must be $1,250. For families, family coverage, the deductible has to be at least $2,500. And so if you do have a high-deductible health plan, you can contribute to an HSA. Now, just like retirement accounts and flexible spending arrangements for that matter, there are contribution limits, and they change from year to year. So for 2014, for an individual, your contribution limit is $3,300. If you have a family plan in 2014, your contribution limit is $6,550. You don't have to contribute those amounts, but that is the maximum permitted in 2014. Now, just like 401ks and IRAs, HSAs have that catch-up provision, but it works a little different. The catch-up amount, like an IRA, is $1,000, but you have to be 55 or older to qualify for that catch-up contribution. You may recall from 401ks and IRAs, you qualify and can kick in that catch-up contribution at age 50 or older. But for HSAs, it's different. The age is 55 or older, and you get that extra $1,000, whether you have an individual plan or family plan. 55 or older, you can kick in that extra $1,000. Okay, so we've talked about what an HSA is, what it's not. We've talked about a high deductible health plan. We've talked about contribution limits in 2014. Now let's talk about how, once you contribute, how you can use the money, the distributions. How do you get it out? What can you use it for? And here's where an HSA can be just a terrific way to save money. If you use the funds that you put in an HSA for qualified medical expenses, you can get them distributed tax-free. So it's kind of, if you think about it, it's like a traditional retirement account on the front end where you contribute pre-tax dollars. But it's almost like a Roth retirement plan on the back end when you use the funds for qualified medical expenses. You get the tax break when you make the contribution, and you don't have to pay taxes on the money or the earnings in the account when you use them for qualified medical expenses. And again, on what's a qualified medical expense, your health plan can help you answer that. Your HSA account administrator can help you answer that. I don't want to get into those details here. But if you do use them for qualified medical expenses, it's a tax-free distribution. The other thing, as I alluded to earlier, is you do not have to use all of your HSA funds in the year you make the contributions. Unlike a flexible spending arrangement, it's not use it or lose it. You can roll over these funds year after year after year. You can be 30 and roll these funds over until you retire when you're 65, all right? So it's not a use it or lose it proposition. You can roll these funds over from year to year, and we're going to talk about that in a minute because that actually makes an HSA a pretty ideal way to save for retirement. We'll come back to that. Here's the other thing. If you do use the money in an HSA for something other than qualified medical expenses, you will be taxed on the money. Plus, and this is important, you could be hit with up to a 20% penalty in additional taxes. Now, again, that's different than a 401k or an IRA. You may be familiar there where you could get hit with a 10% penalty. Well, with an HSA, it's 20%. So if you put money into an HSA, it really needs to be spent only on qualified medical expenses until you're 65. Once you're 65, you can take money out of the HSA without penalty. Again, if it's for a qualified medical expense, there'll be no taxes to pay. If it's for any other reason, you will have to pay taxes on it. In that sense, it's very similar to a pre-tax or traditional 401k or IRA. But once you hit 65, there's no penalty for using funds in an HSA for something other than qualified medical expenses. Now, again, this is where it's a bit different than a 401k or an IRA. You may recall there you can take money out penalty-free at what age? That's right, 59 and a half. So HSA is different. The age is different. You're talking 65. And again, we'll come back to that in a minute when we talk about using an HSA to help boost your retirement savings. But I know I've kind of gone through a lot here. Remember, you can always check the show notes to go back over these points. It'll be, this is podcast 67, so you'll be able to find the show notes at DoughRoller.net/podcast 67, podcast 67, and I'll have some resources in the show notes as well. I know we've gone over a lot pretty quickly, but that at a high level is how an HSA works. Now, I've got some bonus tips for you before we get to the second question about using it for retirement savings. So bonus tip number one is an HSA calculator. So if you go to, and again, I'll leave this link in the show notes, but it's wageworks.com/HSA calculator. Wageworks.com/HSA calculator. This is a calculator that can help you work through what's your best option. Should you go with a high deductible plan and pair that with a health savings account, or should you perhaps go with a lower deductible plan that doesn't qualify for a health savings account? And so it's a very easy calculator to work through. It works whether you're single or you have a family. And I walked through it very quickly, and very easy to use. So that's bonus tip number one. That tool, again, wageworks.com/HSA calculator. And again, I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. Okay, bonus tip number two is another tool called HSAsearch.com. So here's the deal. Even if you have your health insurance through an employer, you can pick your own HSA company to manage your HSA account. And that's really important for a couple of reasons. One is different administrators have different investing options. And you obviously want an administrator that has really good and, in my view, low-cost investing options, like, for example, Vanguard funds. We'll come back to that in tip number three. But in tip number two, HSAsearch.com is a way to search for companies that can manage your health spending account. And again, it's very easy to do, and it's very easy to compare the providers. HSA Search gives a ton of information, including the monthly maintenance fees of different HSA providers, the investment options. For example, not all of them offer mutual funds. For me, that's exactly what I would want. So I would immediately eliminate an HSA provider that didn't offer, for me, low-cost mutual funds. But in any event, whatever your goals are, whatever you're looking for, I think HSA Search will help you, narrow down your choices. So that's bonus tip number two. As I was preparing this podcast, I knew it was going to be packed full. So I hope you're following. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but again, all this stuff will be in the show notes. Bonus tip number three is I've not used them before, but one of the HSA providers that I came across that offers low-cost Vanguard funds is called Health Savings Administrators, and their URL is actually hsaadministrators.info. hsaadministrators.info. Now, again, I don't have any relationship with this company. I've never spoken to anyone at this company. As I've mentioned, I've never had an HSA account, so obviously I've never used Health Savings Administrators. But if I were to get a high deductible plan, and I think that's coming in our near future, I would give a serious look at Health Savings Administrators. And if you go to their site, you'll see, in fact, one of the navigation links is to a list of the Vanguard funds that they offer if you open up an HSA account with them. So again, I'm not endorsing them in any way. I'm simply mentioning them as an option that offers a low-cost Vanguard fund, something for you to check out if you're looking for someone to manage your HSA. Okay, so that was a lot of information. Again, check the show notes out for all the links. Now we got to get to question two. We've only gotten through question one here. Question two, how can an HSA help for retirement savings? Well, you've probably already zeroed in on this based on just as we walked through what an HSA is and how it works. But there's a couple of components of an HSA that can actually make it a decent account for retirement savings. First is you don't have to spend it all that year, obviously, so you can roll it over from year to year. Of course, that requires you to spend less on qualified medical expenses than you actually contribute, right? If you need all that money and you spend it all, and that may be the right thing to do, but obviously in that circumstance, at least for that year, you won't have money to carry over to the next year to build up for retirement. But hopefully over longer periods of time, you'll contribute more than you actually spend, and you can let that money grow for you, and it can be, in that sense, part of your retirement savings. The second thing is, as we mentioned, is while you do have to wait until you're 65, once you hit 65, you can spend money in your HSA for reasons other than qualified medical expenses and not get hit with a penalty. Now, you do have to pay income tax on it. In that sense, it would act very much like a pre-tax 401k or deductible IRA. The only difference is that you have to wait until you're 65 to start using the money penalty-free rather than with a 401k or IRA when you can start at 59 and a half. That being said, that's a downside, the 65. But however, once you hit 65 and you may be looking at your HSA for some retirement income, you still, even then, can use some of it for qualified medical expenses, and it comes out tax-free. So, particularly in retirement, I think for most folks, their medical expenses tend to go up. Even when you're on Social Security, you're going to have out-of-pocket expenses, and I'm not Social Security, Medicare. You're going to have out-of-pocket expenses. So even once you pass 65, if you've got an HSA and it's got a balance, you can still continue to use it for qualified medical expenses, and do so without paying taxes on those funds. But then you can use it for other retirement expenses, and while you get taxed, you don't have to pay the penalty. And the third thing that I like about this as a retirement savings vehicle is it doesn't limit what you can contribute to your 401k or your IRA. You can contribute, you can max out your 401k at say $17,500, ignoring the catch-up provision for a moment. And if you're permitted, depending on your income and your situation at work, you may be able to max out an IRA and deduct it, or perhaps max out a Roth IRA and still contribute up to the contribution limits to an HSA. So in that sense, it's a way to really extend the amount of money you can put away for either future medical expenses, of course, in the first instance, but then beyond that, for retirement income once you reach 65. And so in that sense, it can really augment what you're able to put away for your needs down the road. And in that sense, I think an HSA is absolutely worth considering as a way to save for retirement. That's the second question for today. Now, the third and final question was an interesting one that I got from a reader, and that was, should you fund an HSA before an IRA or even a 401k? And the theory being, let's say you don't have the money to max out your 401k and your IRA and your HSA. And so you're left with choices. Where do I put the limited amount of funds that you have? And some have written that really you should fund an HSA before an IRA. And the theory being you can use it for medical expenses tax-free, and it still acts as beyond that as a retirement account. Yeah, you have to wait until you're 65, but you'll have other sources of income, and many people work till they're 65 anyway. And because an HSA can be used tax-free for qualified medical expenses, it's really better to fund it first than an IRA or a 401k. That's the theory. I don't disagree with that, although I don't think it's quite as clear-cut as some make it to be. Clearly, the advantage is the tax-free spending on qualified medical expenses, whether that's now or even in retirement. Without question, a huge benefit. But there are some disadvantages. If you do need it early, you have to pay a 20% penalty instead of the 10% penalty for an IRA or 401k. And as I mentioned, you do have to wait until you're 65 to avoid that penalty. So, I think there are pros and cons to using an HSA even before, or funding an HSA even before an IRA or a 401k. Where I come out is this: if you have limited funds and you can't max out all of these accounts, but you have a high deductible plan and you certainly want to put aside money at a minimum for the medical expenses you think you'll incur in the current year, I tend to want to do a little bit of both. I'm generally not you got to do all an HSA first and then maybe a 401k or IRA or the other way around. The first thing I would do is, of course, max out a 401k to the extent you have a employer match. That's just free money. And then beyond that, you could fund a little bit in the HSA and a little bit in to finish off the 401k or an IRA. I tend to like to do a little bit of both. But again, I do think an HSA, and why I wanted to mention it and include it as the main topic of today's podcast, can be an excellent way to save for retirement. And so I wanted to share that with you, also respond to the listener questions that had asked me about it. The rules are, like any of this stuff, the rules are convoluted. I wish I wish our politicians could get together and simplify retirement savings, medical expenses, and how we pay for them, and our tax code. But I guess Hope Spring is eternal. But boy, I tell you, I live right outside of Washington. So politics are sort of ingrained in everything we do around here. And you listen to these folks and you just shake your head and you think that's never going to happen. But I try to be an eternal optimist, so we'll see. It is convoluted. So while I've given you an overview today, and in the show notes you'll see some links to some additional resources, I highly encourage you to talk to your healthcare administrator if you're through work about this, about how to use an HSA, confirm the contribution limits with them, confirm what qualifies as medical expenses, and do the same even if you're shopping on your own in the individual healthcare market through the healthcare exchanges or not. They will be able to help you. They'll be able to tell you which plans qualify as a high deductible plan, and whether or not that you can then qualify for an HSA. Use those resources that are available to you. But again, I think it's a great option. Wanted to share it with you today. Hope you found the podcast useful. If you do use an HSA, shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you as to how it's working for you, particularly, if you use it at all, but particularly if you're kind of using it for retirement. I've talked to some folks and read online some interesting articles that say, you should max out an HSA if it's available to you and not use it for medical expenses, or at least not all of your medical expenses. Pay for some medical expenses out of pocket so the HSA can grow tax deferred at a minimum for a longer period of time. So if you've taken that approach or are otherwise using it to help fund your retirement, shoot me an email and let me know. I'd love to hear from you, as well as who manages your HSA and if you're happy with them. I'll share those results in a future podcast. But if you've got an HSA provider you're happy with, would love to hear about it and who they are and why you like them. So there you go. That brings our show to a close. Again, you can find the show notes at DoughRoller.net/podcast67. If you haven't already, sign up for our weekly newsletter. You can do that at DoughRoller.net/newsletter. It goes out every Saturday, packed full of all kinds of personal finance and investing goodness, links to all over the internet for stuff that I think will help you make the most of your money. You can subscribe to this podcast and leave an honest rating and review. Just go to DoughRoller.net/iTunes. That will direct you to the iTunes page where this podcast resides. And I've gotten a ton of reviews, and they've been very helpful. I really appreciate it. If you've already given a review, thank you so much. And last but not least, you can reach out to me, dr@DoughRoller.net. I read every email, and I respond to every email. It's funny, I get a lot of email from folks that say, I hear you say you respond to every email, so I'm emailing you. I do. Hey, until next time, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.